What's up, humans? Today we have a special episode. This is our first interview format for the What is Humans podcast, but today we're sitting across from a friend of ours, not just a friend, but a four-time state champion, collegiate national champion in the 400 medley relay, school record holder at Cal in the 100-meter breast, and then the 400-meter medley relay, Croatian record holder in the 50 and 100-meter breaststroke, and then represented Croatia in the 2021 Olympics in the 100 breast and 50 free, Ema Rajic.
What's going on?
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, you guys.
Yeah, for sure. The one question we wanted to start with is, of all of those accolades that we just talked about on that card, and knowing you, in prior in advance, is right now in your life, what role do you identify with most?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's something I struggle with every day. I think even when I was an athlete at Cal, and even in high school too, I was constantly switching between, being the swimmer and having the swimmer mentality, and then being the student and the academic that I was supposed to be, and constantly flipping between those two was such a struggle for me. And I never really figured out how to really stitch the two or combine the two. And that's something that when I stopped swimming, that took the hardest hit.
Sure.
Because it took away that swimming side, and so then it was like constant academic focus, professional focus.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I think if I had to sum it up in a couple words right now, it would probably be student.
Yeah.
You're learning for life, so to speak.
Love
So as much as I focus on professional development in my career and, really just starting that, I'd probably say even there, like totally student.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Well, definitely appreciate you being vulnerable with us, and in this podcast, in this format, we've talked a lot about, our personal lives in terms of, Dennis and I played collegiate soccer. So, we relate with that, maybe not at the level you were at being an Olympic swimmer. But identity is a core theme to this. And I think it's a question that we need to ask ourselves frequently, because we have so many different roles in life. You're a friend, a sister, a daughter, you are this swimmer, you are, a professional and a student. So I love that answer being kind of the student for life, because that's kind of what we are.
For sure. So let's go all the way back to the beginning so that we can kind of get a better idea of like who you are and how you like managed to achieve so much success, honestly, at like a really young age, right? So give listeners and viewers at home like a backstory, right? You start out, were you always in Illinois originally? That's where you like born and grew up?
Yeah, born and raised in Illinois. Started swimming at the age of 7, mostly because my sister started first. And my mom was like, I'm not driving you to Cypress Sports.
You're going to do this.
Throwing you in there.
You have to do it. Yeah.
I really hated it at first. I sucked at swimming. I was trash. And I think a lot of where my success came from was my family and kind of how they viewed, if you're doing something, you're going to put your whole effort into it and you're going to be the best that you can. It doesn't mean that you have to be number one at everything, but you have to be giving 100% of yourself.
Right.
And giving an honest kind of effort and reflection at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of how that started developing after the age of 7, when I realized I was like, yeah, I'm trash at swimming. Like I don't want to be trash. I want to be better than this. And so I went to a lot of private swim lessons, to just try and get myself better. I had really supportive coaches as well, who threw me in sets and practices that I really didn't want to do. Right. And there were a lot of times where I'd come home and be like, I hate swimming. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Yeah. I just want to read a book, watch a movie, whatever. And then, the next day I'd get up in the morning and I'm like, you know what, let's just try it again. Let's try it one more day. And I think from there, it slowly started to build up into something bigger. And during high school is really when I started noticing things clicking together. Right. And I'm a pretty competitive person by nature. Mm-hmm. I think that goes without saying. I love winning. I love being the best at whatever I'm doing. And so during high school, I wasn't the like top of the best or the cream of the crop in swimming, but I was kind of slowly developing my way through there. And I went to a high school that was very specialized, was very STEM oriented. You had to apply to get in. It it was connected with the University of Illinois, and being introduced into that environment of such a tough academic setting also kind of spurred on my motivation to be a really good student and to start, really applying myself in school. And I love learning. I'm a nerd. Like, I love history and all of that.
Sure.
And being in that setting and combining it with swimming, like, just really the marriage of the two really kind of cultivated like my competitive spirit.
Right.
And I mean, it was definitely like a grind. Like, I remember in high school, like, I slept maybe 6 hours per night. Like, there were times where I'd wake up at 4:45 to hit the pool before school.
Wow.
Go to school, taking these classes that, are accelerated, that you're with people, like, all my friends are super smart. They all went to like Stanford, like Yale, all of these Ivy Leaguers.
Yeah.
And then, I'd get home from school, I'd go straight to another practice, or I'd go to the YMCA and go lift weights on my own.
Right.
And I'd come home, do homework until like 10 or 11, hit the hay, and get up the next morning and do it all over again.
That was a day in the life.
That was literally the day in the life. So that's a little bit on my background.
I mean, that's cool. Knowing you and hearing this, it clearly shows your discipline, and I guess love you found, for swimming, but also the competitive outlet it gave you in swimming, and to be a professional where you're applying it to school and elsewhere. I was curious on, I guess, the difference maybe for you on like that competitive nature you have and how you've applied it, elsewhere. Clearly you talked about like the grueling days of getting up, to go to the pool. It's not like you loved it every day. We talk about a lot in this podcast about like passions and purpose. I guess what was like some of the line throughs, or it's like, was it just the competitive nature that it gave you? Was it the discipline it taught you? Or was it like, hey, swimming was everything for me, so that's why I did it?
Yeah. That's a great question. And I think there are a lot of athletes that will say that their sport is everything to them.
Yep.
And I definitely was not one of them.
Sure.
And I think, doing a challenging major in college and also like competing at a D1 level shows testament to that.
Definitely.
I think for me, like, my kind of personal mission in that was, my family's all from Croatia. Like, they're all from there. They immigrated here like 1990s. And I was grown up in like that culture, and we'd go back every other summer and see family back there, and they'd visit us and things like that. And seeing their just kind of joy when seeing me like after a year and things like that, and being like, oh, you've grown so much, or oh, you can swim so much faster now, and things like that. That was kind of my personal goal, in a sense, to make my family proud, and seeing them be like, wow, like, I'm so proud of you, like, you're really pushing it and things like that. That really, for me, ignites the fire in me. And I think, to go like super personal, I guess, my grandpa on my dad's side was the biggest person in my life. He was at the time, and he will be moving forward. And I just remember him, he was having issues with like a DVD player when I was like 12 or like 11.
Right.
He was like, yeah, I can't figure it out. And I was like, oh, like, give me the pamphlet. Like, I can do this. And I did it in like 5 minutes. And I just remember him like being like,
that's insane.
He was like, you're going to be a good kid. Like,
You're a genius.
You're so smart. Yeah.
It was like that moment where I was like, oh, like, I just made my grandpa proud, like the biggest person in my life. Yeah. And from that moment onwards, it was like, I'm going to do everything I can to give back to that. Yeah. And for swimming, it was swimming for Croatia, swimming for that, for their country. And obviously I have I was born with dual citizenship. But making that aspect proud, and then even the academic setting too. And, like, I'm getting my master's in drug development, and part of that is because my grandpa had cancer, and he passed away from it. And at the time there were no real treatments for it. And that, for me, seeing how that impacted me and impacted my family was kind of the motivation for me to go into pharma and to be like, no, I want to work on this area of pharma and like drug development. I want to be the person that, obviously one person isn't going to change the entire landscape, but at least I'm doing as much as I can to, you know, look at myself in the mirror and be like, I'm trying to change, you know, that experience for anyone else out there. I don't want anyone else to go through that.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of like what keeps me going in the morning. That has, and that always will. And I'm sure you guys like have something like that you're like, think of that. And I'm like, I'm out of bed.
Yeah. I was just going to say, I mean, I think that's something like you were saying, like making your grandpa proud or making your parents proud at such a young age. I think, at least for me, you talked about kind of like that turning point when you're in your teens where you're like, you know, you didn't want to go to these practices, right? And I remember the same thing with us playing soccer. It was like, I remember being 13 or like maybe before that 12. It's like, I did not care about soccer, but it's like your parents make you go. And then you turn the corner when you're like 14 and you're like, oh, I'm good at this now because I went, and it's like fun. And I was just wondering for you, like when you talked about like making your parents proud, and that's, I think like that was a big driver for me, and still something that I kind of deal with today. And like, even with like boss figures or like coaches, a lot of it was making them proud and like doing my best for them. Part of that I really like love about myself, but also it's like, as I've become more of an adult, I also kind of realized, oh, like I have to be an independent person too. So I was wondering if like you ever felt like pressure or that weirdness of like, man, like I hated more letting down my parents and my like bosses and teammates. Like I could let down myself, but it was mortifying for me to let down like my parents, or like my grandparents, something like that, right? Sure. So I mean, was there like a time that you remember where you're like, oh, like especially as you were like going into like, you know, becoming an adult in your 20s going to Tokyo, it's like, oh, like I'm doing this for me now too, as opposed to just for mom and dad or for your grandpa or.
Yeah, that's something I really, really struggle with, doing something for myself. And I think before in college and even in high school, I was so busy. I didn't have the time of day to be like, oh, I'm going to do something for myself. Yeah. Like, no, I was like, if I have a moment, I'm going to take a nap or I'm going to do my homework, things like that. And now when I'm kind of out of that, I still have a very busy schedule, but I have pockets of time on the weekend where I'm like, I usually sit in bed and I'm like, I have 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. I have no idea what to do with myself. You asked me what my hobbies are.
What are they? Yeah.
I used to love cooking. I don't do that anymore because it's just me. Yeah. So it's like, I'm trying to cook for someone else, make them happy.
Sure.
I'm like, I really don't know what to do. Like, I don't know how to do that. And I think part of that journey, you have to start out small and just recognizing like, this might sound really stupid, and feel free to be like, what the hell? But for me, it's like on my commute every day, there are moments on my commute where I see the ocean. And then there are moments on my commute where I see the mountains. Yeah. I'm like, well, I would rather look at the ocean than look at the mountains. Yeah. So then it's like, okay, well, when I have some time on the weekends, I'm going to go take a walk by the ocean.
Yeah. Right.
Oh, well, you know what? I took a walk near the marina and saw some boats. Really resonated with that. So I'm going to start taking walks around some boats.
Yeah.
And like, little by little, I start going there like every single weekend. I'm sitting there reading a book, watching the boats, just, you know, making myself feel happy. Yeah. Is it like good for anybody else that I'm doing that? No. Yeah. So that's kind of where I'm like, that's.
No, I love that so much. It's like so hard, like being that type of person, at a competitive person that is driven by family. You know, I relate to this too. It's like, I feel like most of our decisions, and maybe this was the same for you, it was so family oriented, where you forget, you put yourself second, you know, in terms of choices. And your example here of like finding time each day of doing something that Emma loves, doing something that I love. If it's the ocean, like you said, something, maybe it's music you play or a book you're reading, how important that is to fuel that fire instead of like always putting yourself in the backseat of like, let's make sure everyone else in my life is taken care of before, you know, you take care of yourself. Because it's kind of the selfless versus the selfish thing that we talk about here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So going back, like basically off of Shane's point with, and like you making your decisions and like we've all had to make a decision with family in mind. It's like, you're getting ready. You realize in high school, okay, I'm pretty good at swimming at this point. You're a 4-time state champion. I remember we've had this conversation outside of the podcast before, but you had some decisions to make with which school you were going to go to and where you're going to go. Also, I didn't even realize at the time that you were at this accelerated STEM program. So you have the grades to go like a lot of different places. How did you end up deciding on Cal, where we'll get into your college career too?
Yeah, that decision at the time felt like the most like life-changing, altering,
right,
like my world's crashing.
Biggest step.
Yeah, no, legitimately. And in some cases, sure, whatever it is. Looking back on that moment, I definitely didn't have the self-confidence to be like, you know what, like I want to go to a swimming program like Cal.
Right.
I can do that. At the time I was like, no, there's no shot. Yeah. So I was looking at more academically inclined universities, and I looked at a couple Ivy Leagues. So I was like, you know, like everyone else at my school is doing that, so why don't I do that? Found out my family was moving down to Austin, Texas. So then I started looking at University of Texas. Yeah. That was such an awesome choice too. I really vibed with the coaches. The team at the time was really cool. And they were pretty fast. They're extremely fast now, but at the time they were like good.
Good, yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't until after, I think, my junior state championships, I got 2 titles, broke those records, and I was like, yeah, okay, that's cool. But I'm from Illinois. It was 1 out of 50 states. Like, it's not a big deal. Yeah. I remember waking up the next morning. I get an email, and the header of the email was like, Cal swimming.
Oh,
and I just remember looking at it. I started screaming upstairs. I'm running down. My mom's like, what the hell's going on? And I'm opening the email. I'm like, dude, like Cal swimming assistant coach just reached out to me, and they want to like learn more about me. And I just remember like losing my mind, and my parents were like, yeah, like that makes sense. And I'm like, I feel like, I feel like that doesn't make sense. Yeah. So the conversation with Cal started there. That was a really cool day. And further along I got in that process, it really came down to just Cal and Texas. I was looking at Northwestern too for a little bit, went on a trip there, but family was leaving Illinois. Right. It's kind of like, I love my family. I want to be close to them.
Right.
So we went to Croatia that summer, and I was just kind of toying with the Cal versus Texas decision. I'm like, well, Cal's very expensive in California. Like, I'm definitely not going to get a scholarship. I can't do that. So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to Texas. Yeah. Done deal. And literally the day before I called the Texas coach and was like, I'm committing, the Cal coach calls me and she was like, hey, we have a scholarship for you. Like, take as much time as you need, but we'd love you to join our team.
Wow.
Within 10 minutes after that call, I was like, I'm going to Cal.
Damn.
So, yeah, I called her like a couple hours later, and she was like, oh, like, that was so fast. And I'm like, well, it's kind of a dream come true. Like, it's a no-brainer for me to commit to Cal.
Yeah.
And, yeah, that was the beginning of that story.
Yeah. How was it, like, moving away, you know, from your parents? Like, I know that, like, I went out of state for soccer. Dennis did too, but, like, family was so important for you. You just did that trip to Croatia. You considered UT for that proximity. You know, was that a huge leap for you? You know, what was that experience like, being away from home, being away from what you knew?
Yeah, I think one thing my parents did really well with raising me is teaching me how to be independent. And I think I'm independent out of fault. I'm a little too independent, and I hate asking for help.
Sure.
And I think for me, moving to Cal, I was okay with it. I was like, well, I know how to take care of myself. I know how to do laundry. Some people don't, which I'm like, I knew how to do like the little things in life. I was like, I can put it together.
Yeah, yeah. Sure.
And it was like such a dream for me that it wasn't like I didn't consider family, but they were all so hyped for me. Yeah. They were like, just go. Like, my mom was like, definitely go. Like, I'm visiting you all the time. I'm like, perfect. Yeah. And that was it. And they visited me a lot. So it was just as much for them as it was for me, I feel like.
Yeah. And we're not like huge within the swimming world, but obviously that call coming from Cal is like a huge deal. You mentioned a little bit about like, you know, at the time coming out of school, you almost had like what feels like imposter syndrome, right? Of like, yeah, like I'm good, but you know, like maybe I'm going to go the academic route because that's safe. And like, I'm not that good at swimming. Right. I felt like that going into college too. And it's like in your small town, maybe, or your high school, you're good. But I always had kind of that, like, I mean, you go in like with this, I'm just going to work hard. And if I get in some games or, you know, if I do well and I make some teams or races, you know, that's great, but not having expectations. Do you feel like you still feel like that in other aspects of your life now? Or did you feel like that in college of like almost like underselling yourself so that you didn't have like, you know, like, because I do it a lot to not get hurt, right? I lowered the expectations. I'm like, oh, you know, like whatever happens, like low stakes, instead of maybe having the confidence that I should based off of the hard work that I've put in.
Yeah, like leaning on cockiness or something. Yeah.
No, totally. And I think when I first came to Cal, I was definitely underselling myself. And I think part of it was true. Like I came from a team that did not do a ton of yardage. We didn't train that much. I wasn't doing doubles per day. I did it on my own.
Sure.
But my team didn't have doubles, so I could sleep in if I wanted to because it was on me.
Yeah.
And I came to Cal and I was humbled. Like, no, I couldn't make the intervals. Like I was dead all the time. I failed my first like math midterm.
Oh, shit.
I was like crying to my mom like on the beach. I'm like, and my mom was like, yeah, you're just gonna have to pick a different major. Like maybe you can transfer or quit swimming after year 2.
Holy shit.
And I was like, yeah, like if that's what I have to do to like keep myself afloat, like I would rather graduate from Berkeley and have that degree in my pocket than like not make the intervals for 4 years. I was like, I can't do that. Like that's hard. And I think throughout my freshman year, I got small inklings that I was doing a little bit better. Okay. You know, people started leaning on me to start performing at dual meets and being like, Cal had a history of not having a ton of breaststrokers on the team. Okay. I was a breaststroker. So I came in already, I wouldn't say with expectation, but being like, oh, there's a gap to fill. And you need to do everything you can to fill that gap. Yeah. Knowing that, having no expectations because I thought I sucked. Right. You know, what's the worst I could have done? Right. And so having that kind of mentality, like, I didn't even have an expectation. I was like, well, whatever happens, like, is going to be the result. Like, whatever happens. Yeah. And it went as far as to, like, well, I made an A final my freshman year. I got 8th at NCAAs. We won the 400 medley relay, was a national champion at the end of my freshman year. Got most improved award, which was probably deserved because I didn't make any intervals at the beginning.
Started from the bottom.
Yeah, exactly. Like you start from the bottom. And I think carrying that mindset of having just no expectations worked really well for me because my sophomore and my junior year, every dual meet, I was like, yeah, like whatever happens, happens. Yeah. Going in with no expectations and being either happy with the details you had during a race, either being happy with the time that you put up on the board after your race. Those were the little things to me that I was like, okay, well, I'm on the right track. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like that, like constant improvement of that 1% better that like keeps you going every day as opposed to, I mean, now I feel like after coming out of collegiate sports, I can kind of look back now, even though I still have a little bit of that like monkey on my back, I feel like of, I got to do more. Like it's never enough. Like I haven't achieved what I want to achieve. Like I've only done this, but I can look back a little bit and be like, you know what? Like I worked hard and I have achieved things. Like, and so I feel like that's the same thing of, you know, you want to come in low expectations, but also at times it's important to like pat yourself on the back and be like, yeah, I am most improved swimmer of the year. I am a freaking national, you know, record holder.
How'd you, I guess, change that perspective? You know, you said that like your teammates were leaning into you. You saw like these small improvements and you had this mindset of like, whatever happens, happens. You know, was it like a mindset shift or was it just like you gave yourself a little bit more time to improve? I just think that might be useful for us, you know, and our listeners to think about of like going from that, here I am with a poor mindset to the, I am great. You know, I do have this confidence that I carry.
Yeah.
Oh man. I don't know if I can really put together like a how-to list on how to do that. 'Cause it was really just like organic. It was really just fulfilling other people's wishes.
Yeah.
To where like I wasn't doing it for myself. I was doing it for the team.
Right.
Sure.
And it was that, you know, environment where I was on the team with American record holders, Olympians with gold medals, and, you know, like I can't even name all the accolades that team had because it was just so insane to me. Man,
It's like how you surrounded yourself. You basically answered. It's like you had all these great swimmers, people around you that you've surrounded yourself with, that just by being near them, it's like through osmosis, you're just already improving. You're already competing against them every single day. And it's hard not to get better when you have that environment.
No, I think that for sure. And I think you couple that with, you know, like the competitive spirit of, you know, whoever. For me, I'm competitive as hell. Like competitive mostly with myself.
Yeah. Sure.
You take that and the environment around, like it's pretty much a recipe for, you know, getting better. And I think success is defined very differently for each person. And I don't think that was like a measurement in my head. I was never like, oh, this is what I'm going to do to be successful. Or because I'm still, I look at myself in the mirror and I'm like, I'm not successful yet. What is successful?
Right. Mm-hmm. Have I made it? I
don't know. Like, I think it's the 1% better like thing too. It's what did I do better than yesterday? What going through an experience, you know, going into a meeting at work or whatever, just reflecting and being like, what can I do better?
Yeah. One thing I'm interested in that is something that Shane and I both, I think, struggle with a lot, but I'm curious because swimming is so nuanced in that it's like you have your individual races, but you also have, obviously, you have your literal medley and, you know, freestyle relays, but then, you know, you're awarded for how the team does overall, right? Talk us through a little bit, like for Shane and I mean, for me specifically, I felt it was really hard once I got out of that team environment in school of like, in college of, like, I feel like our whole mission was like, make the conference championships, like make the NCAA tournament, you know, do well.
The team success.
Exactly, the team success. And then once I got out, it was like, like we're all just individuals. There's, you know, like in corporate America, right? I feel like it's so loose. It's like, what is that
you
goal?
gotta have your own individual success versus that team success. So what in swimming?
Did you feel like it prepared you like better for the outside world of like having that like, you know, like you have that individual mindset of, hey, like it's just you in the lane against, you know, the 7 other lanes. Was that helpful, you think, in, you know, growing up?
I think it was because I didn't have anyone to rely on but myself.
Right.
Sure. I really sucked at underwater pullouts and breaststroke and my turns. It was a known fact on my team that I sucked. And I stayed behind on practices to work on it. I had my coaches take videos. I had my teammates stay behind practice to help me out.
Sure.
And I never really got that much better at underwaters and turns. Yeah. But at least I could look myself in the mirror and be like, damn it, I'm trying.
Yeah.
Like, it's not getting better, but I'm trying. And if there's something I could do to do it better, I would be doing it. Mm-hmm. And so it's really like you being just in the lane is a reflection of exactly what you put in. You can't hide behind another teammate passing you the ball or, you know, I don't even know how to relate it to soccer because I don't even have that experience to fall back on, that mentality. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's almost like in swimming, like I don't want to go out there and like embarrass myself or something. Right. And once you start doing well, you obviously want to continue doing well and you want people to continue, you know, applauding you and be like, yeah, great race. Yeah. Having a bad race sucks. Yeah. You get out of the pool, people are like, ooh.
It's so visible. It's so visible.
It's very visible. Like, ooh, maybe next time. Like, no, I don't want to feel that.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I love that, like, there's no hiding in swimming. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think that's just like a good thing, like as an individual to practice is like, what are we like hiding behind, you know, in swimming, it's like, it's visible, it's clear that you know, aren't performing, you know, in a team dynamic, in a team sport, you know, it's easy just to, you
don't want
fall
the ball
to the team success or failure. Mm-hmm. And you can easily pass blame to another versus you can actually take that sole responsibility for your own ability. Yeah. So love that.
Yeah. I mean, as you're going through college now, right? You're at Cal, you got most improved swimmer. Are you building that confidence, you know? Cal's obviously a great program. So across the nation, you're like, okay, we're pretty damn good. You know, that's feeling good. Are you starting to kind of like, I was interested in the pendulum between pressure as you're like no longer a freshman, you're a sophomore, maybe there's more responsibility on you as a breaststroker. Was there pressure, you know, like you said, to perform for Cal? And did you feel like you thrive off of that pressure? Or do you feel like there were times or races or meets where it was like, you're overwhelmed and you're like, oh my God, like if I don't, you know, place, that's a lot of points lost, or that's, you know, not great.
No, yeah, you summed it up right there. Yeah. I think it falls back to the idea of just like having fun in what you're doing and my team environment. And if it wasn't for the close friendships I made on that team, that pressure totally would have gone to me and I would not have been able to do as well. So I was very adamant with myself on taking every race, like whatever happens, happens. I'm just going to go out there, have fun, prove to others the hard work I've been putting in. Yeah. Because like, I need that for myself too. Like grinding day in, day out. You want to give a good race to be like, okay, like I'm actually doing something here. It has a result. I remember this one particular meet we had, I think it was sophomore year. It was in Minnesota. It was our mid-season. We didn't rest or taper for it. So you kind of just go in. You're like, okay, like it's mid-season. Yeah. Some people do really bad. Some people do really well. Right. So I went in there. I was like, okay, whatever. Like I haven't qualified for NCs. I have an entire season ahead of me to do that. The day before the 100 bro strike, which is my best shot to make NCs, I had a midterm that started at 11 p.m. because it was Cal time. Yeah. So it started at 11 p.m. It was genetics to just make the matters worse. And there was a heavy like math, like physics aspect to that. Component, yeah. So I was already like, I'm screwed. I was like, shit. So I go through that. I actually ended up doing well, but at the time I was like, that reamed me. Like that was the end of my like academic journey. Yeah. So I get back into my room. I started crying. I'm like hyperventilating like a little bit. I'm trying to keep it quiet in my bed because my teammate on the other bed is like trying to sleep. So I go out into the hallway at the hotel like 1 a.m. I'm just hyperventilating to myself. Yeah. I don't even know how, but my assistant coach decides to exit her room. She sees me in the hallway and she goes like, come here. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, shit. Like she's about to like ream me for crying and like not sleeping enough. And I get into her room and she was like, so like, what's the motivational quote I should say at the team meeting the next day? And I was like, what? Yeah. And I mean, it worked like a charm because it took my mind off of I just failed. Like I'm tired. Like I'm not sleeping well, all that kind of stuff. So I finally somewhat sleep from like 2 to 7. I'm up and, it's just like not a great sleep. Yeah. So I get to the pool deck at like 8 to warm up. Go to my coach. I'm like, hey, like I really didn't sleep well last night. Like I'm sure the assistant coach told you like I'm in shambles. I'm trying to hold it together. Like I could burst into tears any moment. Yeah. And she's like, that's okay. I was like, what? She's like, we have the entire season. Like it's not life or death. You're gonna do well. Like I see your hard work. It's gonna be okay. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's gonna be fine. So I'm kind of warming up. I'm not really doing my due diligence to like stretch really well. Sure. I didn't really fuel myself because I'm so stressed and I'm so upset. I can't eat. Get behind the blocks. I don't even do like my usual like pre-race like shakeout or whatever. I get on the blocks. I'm like, fuck it. Just like here we go. I was like, get it over with. Like let's just do it and whatever. Let's ride. Yeah. Touch the wall. Qualify for NCAAs. No. Like best time. My teammates are going wild. My parents are like, what the hell? Yeah. Get out of the pool and I'm like, I literally don't know how I did that. And my coach was like, like that wasn't bad. Like kudos. And I was just like, I don't even know how that happened. So that's always a really good experience to fall back on is like when things feel like they're at their absolute worst. Right. you can still perform at your best.
Yeah. And it feels like it was just a reminder too of like what your coach knew and what you were saying is like every day you're putting in this work. And it's like, I just feel like that faith that they had in you that you don't even have in yourself sometimes is like, it's having those good people around you that are like, hey, you're crushing it every day.
Yeah.
Today sucks. It's going to be okay. And then like, look what happened.
Yeah. And it's almost like getting out of your own way of like, you have this genetics test, you have poor sleep, you still have this race tomorrow. And then you are reminded from your coach of, hey, no biggie. It's just another race. And it drops your guard, in the pool. You are more relaxed and then you can perform that race.
Yeah. Did you feel like, so timeline wise, what is the year we're at right now? We're at 2019 is when you get your national championship for the medley relay, right? Mm-hmm. So you're kind of, in the swimming world, are you on the map? Like, is that like a big point on the map of like, okay, collegiate swimmers, obviously swimming's a huge Olympic sport. Mm-hmm. Is that like a pretty good set in line? Like, okay, these are kind of the people that we're looking at for the future years to come.
Yeah. I think so. I got that. I was part of that national championship my freshman year.
Yeah.
So right out of the hatch is like freshman getting that.
Beast. Right.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think it was less about who had done it. Like it was less about me than it was that Cal had yet again lived up to their hype, put a breaststroker up on that map, had, been able to elevate that team to that standard. And it's not a shock that Cal was so good at that NCAAs.
Sure.
But I think it was more about the fact that we had a big breaststroke hole and
you filled it.
I rose to the challenge, I guess. I was just doing my best.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. And I remember after that, I wasn't really thinking about international swimming at all. I was like, collegiate is great. Like, I need to get back on my academic grind because I, just missed a lot of stuff.
Sure.
That's tough. And this one day, and this speaks volumes to Cal's just legacy.
Yeah.
Sure.
We get this guy walking in. He looks kind of Balkan, Croatian, super lanky. And I'm like, that could be the silver medalist at the Athens Olympics for the 50 free or whatever Olympics it was. And I'm like, he's Croatian. That could be him.
I can tell. Yeah.
Yeah. So after practice, I go up to talk to him and my coach. And he goes, you should really swim for Croatia. And I was like, me?
Right.
You're joking. And he's like, no, just do it. Here's the number of my coach there. I know you have family that lives very close to that place. You're set. What's there to think about? And I'm like, what's there to think about?
A million things.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I called that coach in Croatia. It went really well. I talked to my parents. I'm like, I need someone to drive me there. I don't have a driver's license there. I need to stay in that house over there that my aunt currently lives in, my mom's childhood house. Mm-hmm. And there's all these logistics I need to figure out. That same summer, we had the World Championships in South Korea. So that was kind of on my mind. I was like, it'd be really sick to go to World Champs.
Yeah.
Exactly the year prior, I swam for the U.S. in a junior level meet in Canada. So my eligibility was for the U.S.
Holy shit.
So I had to go to FINA, which is the World Association of Swimming, and appeal that national eligibility thing and be I want to change, countries. Mm-hmm. Literally, I don't know how the timing worked out, but it was almost exactly a year after I'd swam for the U.S. that I could switch to Croatia. And it was a month out from Worlds. I didn't even know if I could try to compete for Croatia until the month before.
Yeah.
So I get that note. I get that email. My dad and I worked so hard crafting all those emails, those letters. Uh-huh. That was stressful.
Yeah.
And I got that email you can swim for Croatia. Your nationality's changed. Boom, bada bang, done. Wow. So then I'm like, oh, well, now I have to start taking this seriously. If I don't make Worlds, that's on me. I can't blame it on the world organization for telling me I can't swim for Croatia. Yeah. So that month I was just busting it. We went to swim meets all over in Croatia. We went to a swim meet in Slovenia. My mom came.
Wow.
I was just doing everything I could to make it. And by some miracle, I got the qualifying time and I went to South Korea for Worlds that summer. And that was the first moment where I was like, I think I could be pretty good. I think I can do good. And, going to world champs there, you just meet so many other Cal athletes, people competing for Spain, for Egypt, for obviously the US, like saw my coach there being the coach for the US and all these things. And people start noticing you and they're like, oh, like you swim at Cal. Yeah. I'm from Cal, or, oh, I swim at Stanford. Like we have that really big rivalry, things like that. And it's like slowly that community starts like just seeing your face around. Like that's kind of how you start building into it. Mm-hmm. And by no means was I like fast. I didn't make semis. I wasn't even close to making finals, but I think it was just me being there and seeing those other people reacting and being like, oh, hey, like you had a good like NCAAs. Yeah. That was like, okay, well, people now know I did that. So now I have to continue that because I want to continue that. Yeah. I think back to your point on pressure, that was when the pressure started to set in a little bit. Yeah. And being like, okay, well, the Olympics are what, like a year out, pre-COVID, a year out. There's a lot of work and a lot of ground I need to cover to try and make the Olympics. And from there, like, that was kind of the journey. Like, that was my mission day in and day out. It was for the Olympics. Obviously, my sophomore year, like NCAAs, and it was obviously very much on my mind. But the behind reasoning was like filling a childhood, lifelong dream of making the Olympics. Yeah.
And again, like looping back to your family, because I was curious. I didn't know you swam for U.S. before Croatia. I was curious, if there was like that was the dream always, Team Croatia versus U.S. Didn't know if you had a preference, but it sounds like just because your family's Croatian, leaning back on your grandfather, it was always Team Croatia, or where'd you stand on that?
Yeah. So I never really considered, that was never a question that ever popped up to my head. Yeah. So I never thought I'd be good enough to get, try and answer that question. When my sister swam, she's 4 years older than me. When she swam at Indiana University, she had gone pretty good to the point of maybe you could internationally swim. Unfortunately, her career kind of derailed, a couple injuries, and she stopped swimming. But the question of swimming for Croatia had been brought up. Right. And I was like, well, you look at my name, no one in America can pronounce that. Yeah. So I was kind of like, us a bit. Yeah. So from there, it was well, I'd rather swim for Croatia because I feel I'm a little bit more Croatian than I am American. And, when I go back to Croatia, it's obvious that I'm American, born and raised. Right. But at the end of the day, here I don't feel fully American, there I don't feel fully Croatian. Sure. So at one point of the day, you have to pick whatever makes you feel comfortable and more at home. For me, that was always Croatia. Yeah. And I suck at speaking the language. I can understand, read, and write like a charm. When it comes to speaking, I'm too anxious of a human to get it out right. Right. So, yeah, that question had, from the get-go, always been Croatia.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. So I'm just interested too. You talk about these Olympic sports, they're so specific, right? Collegiate, and then, at the international Olympic level, people train for 4 years for this one opportunity, right? And you find out basically after these worlds, kind of like everything, in your life, I feel like, especially sports-wise, is, I've been working really hard, sure. Somebody thinks I'm really good, I can do this. I guess I'll just do that, at different levels. So you get this idea in your head, internationals, the Olympics are coming up. Most people have been training, and the top people, they've been thinking about it, I feel like, for a while. At that moment, were you that year, you said that, the whole mission was to qualify for that Olympics. I mean, was that unbelievable pedal to the metal that year while you were also doing, it was also in season for Cal too, right? Mm-hmm. But I can only imagine the weight and the pressure in the back of your mind had to be, and I'm sure a lot of your other teammates at Cal were like, hey, this is a freaking qualifying year. Yeah. And I'm sure it was a lot of goals for those girls and guys on the Cal swimming team in general. It's now or never for a lot of people, right? Yeah.
100%. And you could feel that walking into the pool deck. And COVID just made things 10 times worse. When COVID struck, it was the day before we flew out to NCAAs that we found out there was no NCAAs. And I was crushed. We were all crushed. Everyone was crying, especially the seniors who had just that taken away from them.
Yeah.
I remember just being like, okay, like I'm going to give myself today to be really, really sad about it. Most of my team got cupcakes. Most of us couldn't even eat it because we were too upset.
Yeah.
Some of us got in the pool just to swim, get the emotions out. That's what I did. Mostly because it was sunny, and I was like, well, I could tan. Yeah. You know, make the day better.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'll just give myself this day to be upset. But the Olympics, as far as I'm concerned, are still on. So that pedal to the metal is not lifting a millimeter off of it. So for the next couple of weeks, the COVID restrictions start to really set in, right? A lot of people are forced to go home. Some of the athletes can stay who are training for really big meets. Slowly, one by one, those people start getting chipped off the block.
Wow.
Some people start going home thinking they'll come back and be able to train. The minute they went home, Cal was like, you're not coming back. You're not coming back. And so at the end of it, for a week, I think, it was 5 of us. It was me, couple of internationals, some of the U.S. national team members who were just swimming and just trying to grind it out.
Wow.
It was depressing, to say the least. It was very depressing.
Yeah.
And it didn't help that our pool was outside and right next to us was a hospital or like the medical center. So we knew they were just watching us from above, seeing us practice and quote unquote like not care about the pandemic.
Right.
And because of that, we ended up getting shut down. So everyone had to go home. I went home to Texas, and Texas was obviously one of the more lenient states with COVID restrictions. And so there's only about a month and a half where I had to just be athletic on land. I didn't have a pool.
Right.
Couldn't do that. So my day for like a month and a half, I'd wake up in a not good mental state at all. You know, I would go for a run or go for a bike ride. Keeping in mind, I hate running.
Yeah,
I still do, but at that moment I did really bad. Go for a run, go for a bike ride, at least like 45 minutes an hour. Then I go in the backyard. Like I filled up grocery bags with books and used them as like weights to do bicep curls, like lunges, things like that. I used the steps like on our porch for like some elevated like squats, things like that. We had a tree branch that I put like a piece of like rope around. I started doing like rows and things like that. It was just like absurd. The things I like concocted together. And finally the restriction lifted, so I got to swim in a pool. And then everyone in Austin decided to go swim at that pool. So I got really close with like the Texas men's team. Okay. Made a couple of really cool friends there. Sure. Met one of my best friends to this day who swam at LSU. And having that community during that time really helped me out because there's no way mentally I could have kept myself physically in that shape being that down bad.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, I was, thinking the entire year, like, I feel like I finally just got the opportunity, the belief that I could make the Olympics.
Yeah. Right.
Then bam, it's crushed for another year. You have to train that way for yet another full year.
Yeah.
Having that in the back of your mind. Mm-hmm. Having that like weight or like brick on your shoulders for yet another year. Still trying to manage school, mind you, with the COVID restrictions, not being able to really see your friends or them being able to come over in house, always being on the edge of uncertainty of like, are we going to get shut down again? Is this pandemic really going to keep going worse or is it going to get better? What's going on?
Yeah.
That was so incredibly hard.
Yeah.
And I, as much as Make the Olympics was the most amazing experience ever, I would not go through that ever again. Just based on that experience, based on that mental state of mind.
That extra year
of terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious. Like, I didn't know if it was going to be, hearing your response would be like, hey, like, I'm glad we got this extra year. But it's more of the like, no, it's like so much pressure. I'd almost would rather know exactly when we're racing, how far we are out. Oh, it turns out it's going to be in 2021.
Yeah.
It just like, again, it's like delays the dream even further.
Yeah.
Which just had to be frustrating.
it was good for me to have another year of training at Cal under my belt and getting their like tip top shape.
Yeah.
But I think the cons of that definitely outweighed that pro.
Yeah.
It was brutal. And my mom will say too, like when I trained in Croatia the month leading up to the Olympics, like I was crying a lot. Yeah. There were a lot of things that she tried to get me to do to make me feel happier. She's like, we should make a TikTok together. And I'm like, how do you know about TikTok? Like, what? She's like, you should read a book. Like, do you want to watch a movie? Like, do you want to bake a cake together? Like, oh God, like, I think that really shows, like, how bad that time was. And I know that's not individual to me. I know a lot of other athletes out there at the time felt like that.
Well, then, I mean, walk us through it. You qualify, you make the Croatian Olympic team in multiple events. You're in Tokyo. You're at this. You just have fulfilled this childhood dream, making the Olympics, and no one's there.
Yeah, you're isolated.
You're in ISO, the Olympic Village part, which I feel like people look forward to a ton. That's not at all what it's normally like. You're wearing a mask everywhere. I mean, was that just a massive letdown, or was it still like you could just sit back and be so proud of yourself, like in that moment? Like, what was that like?
Yeah, so thankfully I didn't have anything to compare it to. So for me going there, I was like, this is sick.
Still sick.
Like with the restrictions or the things you're not allowed to do. We couldn't leave the village unless we're going to the pool. We couldn't tour the city at all. That was a letdown. Yeah. Having my parents not come after supporting me financially that much and mentally, like everything they did, not having them be there and see that was the biggest blow ever. But I mean, besides that, I was just like, I'm stoked to be here. Like, this is awesome. This is sick. I can't believe I'm here. Like, there's no way this is happening. And even with those restrictions too, that like I got pretty close to some people on the Croatian Olympic team, and we had some rowers who got like gold medals. We had Taekwondo got a gold medal, like I think a bronze or silver as well. Seeing that was so cool. Like some people still don't even know what Croatia is, where it is. Like, what language do you speak? Like, what do you eat? Like things like that. It's like, you really don't know like what it is. And seeing those athletes put us on the map on the Olympics was a sense of like pride I have never felt before. And I didn't do that much. I swam very bad in Tokyo, and mostly because I was just trying to make it.
Yeah.
That being said, obviously I gave it my all when I raced, but I didn't swim well at all. It like didn't even matter though, because everyone on the team was like, you gave it your best. You made it here in the first place. That's as much as you can do.
Yeah.
God, like I still want to go back to Tokyo and like see the city and everything. Cause that part was brutal. It was definitely a little creepy.
I couldn't imagine. No, that's so cool. I mean, hearing that experience, and I'm glad it wasn't, that letdown. You didn't have that experience prior, but still you were able to feel that, sense of pride for country. You're swimming for something bigger than yourself. Compared to, it's just me, and you weren't even able to let yourself down because you represented your country. You could hang your head up high, from that.
So, I mean, at this time, you're like, that's the thing is that I don't know if people listening or viewing at home know, you're so young. You're an Olympian.
Yeah, like 20.
You're what, 21?
21.
21, you're an Olympian. Like the amount of the percentage of people in the world in, the history of time, you're in an elite group of individuals. At that time, are you like, hey, I've gone to this unbelievable school in Cal. I've busted my ass for so long taking these hard classes and swimming at the same time. I've just achieved this huge childhood athletic dream and goal. Are you like was there conversation? Was there thought of like, okay, I'm going to go into the real world now? Or was it like, there is swimming for me after this Olympics. Like, what was that conversation like with others or in your own? I'm sure it was big with your parents, you know, because they've been such a huge inspiration and, you know, huge like person in that conversation. What was that like?
Yeah, that is something that's not talked about a lot because most people are just like, oh, how was the Olympics? Like, how was it training for that? The part after, when you come home after the Olympics, was just as hard as training for it. Keeping in mind, it was right before collegiate season, so I had about 2 or 3 weeks to not swim at all and to just try and reset from the year and a half of just continuous grinding. Mentally, after achieving that big dream, and even though I went into the Olympics not expecting to make a semifinal, by no means was I close. That was set on the table. I knew that for myself. But even coming home and being like, I just went to the Olympics and I feel like I have nothing to show when I come home.
Wow. Yeah.
For me, that was a hard struggle for some reason. I don't really know why, because it was very apparent I was not even going to semifinal, let alone stand on the podium. Just coming home after that and being like, yeah, like I went there and being like, okay, well, what now? Like I did that dream. A national champion. I have the school record. Like I don't really know what else to do with myself. And I'm looking at the last year of like my collegiate season. I had an extra year of eligibility for COVID. So it was either a year or 2 years left of swimming because I was not going to continue swimming or try to professionally after. So going into senior year, I think I definitely did not let myself reset and take a step back as much as I needed to from swimming and just trying to come to terms of what I just did and being okay with it. Having to, put the goggles back on and being like, okay, like here we go again, like collegiate season, time to like bust my ass again. Yeah. There was no drive in me. There was nothing in me. There wasn't a single ounce of my being that wanted to be at the pool, which is, for me, that was super unlike me. And I struggled so hard swimming my senior year. You just look at my times, they were trash. Yeah. One of the first dual meets we had, it was against Virginia, who were, I think at that time, 2-time national championships. They won both times, an incredible amount of talent and just hard work. That team was incredible, still is incredible. We had a dual meet with them. We're in practice suits. Like, they have a really good breaststroker on their team. I knew that. I was like, well, it's in front of our home crowd. Like, I'm going to try. My parents even flew out. I was like, I have to try to just put the pieces together and show up and just have one good race. And I ended up doing that. For me, I swam under a minute in a practice suit, qualified for NCAAs off a dual meet. That was, for me, like, oh my God, like, I'm still okay. I can still swim.
Sense of relief, yeah.
Yeah, it was good. And then from that race onward, so downhill. Yeah. I could not step up and deliver for my team, no matter what I did. And I think I was so down bad in swimming that I started turning to academics and trying to salvage like my academic workload that last year and put the pieces together. Obviously, life after college, I just start thinking about that. What the hell am I going to do after this? Right. So I start, joining clubs. I not co-founded, but I was one of the leading members of a new club for what was called like Athletes in Medicine. So I started taking that onto my plate.
Very cool.
Started doing a mentorship at Genentech with someone who is still very big in my life and gives me a lot of advice, career advice, and just professional and all the sorts. And so I started doing that. And those two outlets for me, those extracurriculars, is what really got me through. Yeah. I thought a lot of times about quitting swimming during my senior year, mostly because I was just so unhappy with myself. Yeah. And it was showing so obviously in the pool. Right. But it was like, well, I'm this far into my collegiate career. I can't quit in the middle of my senior year. My team needs me. At the end of that year, I didn't even deliver for my team. I was a total letdown. I got kicked off the relay that I once won a national championship in. I didn't even break a minute at NCAAs after doing it at a dual meet in a practice suit. it was embarrassing. It was bad. And part of me was like, I don't care. Yeah. I literally don't care. I spent all this time trying to do everything, show up day in and day out, put a good time down, score some points for my team. I just can't put it together my senior year. And after NCAA's my senior year, when I got out for my last race, my coach was like, well, we really need to fix your turns. Like, if you're going to use your next year of eligibility.
Oh, boy.
I remember being like, no, that was the last year. That was the last race in my career ever. I'm not getting in the pool ever again. I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm done. Of course, she didn't really know that I was done. I think she could piece it together, but things were pretty stressful at the time. So that was a little bit understandable. I was so mad. I was so mad at how my senior year turned out. I had gone from, being most improved, like coach's award my junior year, making the Olympic team, to just being like absolutely nothing my senior year. And it sucked. Yeah. I wanted to be a role model for those younger than me on the team. Yeah. And swimming wise, I wasn't.
Yeah.
And that really sucks.
Yeah. You've been hard on yourself, and I know that feeling too. It's like I can't even imagine your experience of coming from that super high that you talked about, of being in the Olympics and going into, this senior year so quickly. You said you had 2 weeks to decompress. How hard it is just to jump back into the pool. Like, I'm sure you were so burnt out, and it probably reflected in your swimming. So it's like, I think you've probably talked about the answer, but like, I'm curious, like, if you were to go back and, tell your younger self, or it's like things you'd change about swimming, or if you could help someone younger than you, are there lessons that you learned in that year of struggle, your senior year, where you can be easier on yourself when you've came from this extreme point of burnout?
God. The biggest lesson, probably the only lesson that I could think of now, because I try not to think about that at all, is just make sure you take the time before jumping right back into it again. Take a break.
Yep.
And
love it.
While that is my advice, and I'm actively not doing that for myself now.
It's hard to practice.
Yeah, that is still something that it's like, I needed that break so hard. And my coach even told me at the beginning of the year, she's like, if you need more time, let me know. Yeah. And we can tell the team that you need time, another week or 2 weeks off of swimming. Yeah. And that's end of discussion. Yeah. And I was like, no, I can do it. Right. I went to the Olympics. I can handle anything. Mm-hmm. Fat lie. Yeah, that would be my biggest advice. Yeah. And just as much as I hate doing this too, like going and talking to somebody. Yeah. I've been in therapy in and out since I was like 12 or 13. I think there was a minute period before, even when I was younger. But just going and getting professional help for that. Yeah. And I know the whole concept of mental health is being talked a lot more now. And I think it's amazing, and it needs to continue, because I'm one of those people that even though I know it's going to help me, that therapy is going to help me, I still think I can do it on my own.
Yeah, you're competitive.
And you're competitive. So you want to prove it to yourself. Like, others are telling you no. For me, that's the biggest green light there is. Yeah. You tell me I can't do something, I'm going to go do it twice.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah. And obviously the detriment that has to your mental health and your life beyond that, totally not worth it.
Yeah. My question was just around like that letdown that you felt like it was your senior year, even though, it wasn't, you still were a huge part of that team. And, such a like example and leader is like, I think similarly, and this like will continue on for the rest of your life, is like, how do you battle with putting your worth in your performance? And like, I know for me, I was in a similar situation where I went from playing all the time to then I didn't play a lot. And then you're like, how, you feel like as a person, and it kind of harps back to our first question, which is identity. Oh, like I'm not good because the one thing that I was really good at, apparently I'm not good at that thing anymore. So now who am I? What am I? And same thing for me, like as we graduate and we go into the real world, it's like, I have that competitive drive.
Yeah.
And so then I'm trying to prove that to not only myself, but people around me, instead of just like knowing that, hey, I'm working my ass off every day, you know, and that's enough. That makes me worthy of, you know, praise, you know, self-praise. Is that something that's like was hard at that time and also still today is like, you know, finding worth not in like success or like medals or placings. Yeah, times.
Yeah, I think something that I will commend myself for is, even though I sucked booty my senior year at swimming, I put in everything into academics. And so I had stuff I could really fall back on and be like, even though I sucked at swimming, this is all that I did during that time as well, not to make up for it, but to prove to myself that even though I'm sucking at something I used to be really good at, I'm still like a worthy human, you know? I think for me, that was the biggest thing I could have done for myself, other than taking a break and going to therapy. But that was definitely not putting my eggs in one basket was the best decision ever. Right. And I try to do that now because I'm so focused on my goals 5 years and 10 years from now in my professional career. Granted, I'm not even a year in to that. I'm so focused on that. I still recognize the idea of having different aspects of your life that you can also be competitive at. And for me right now, I'm at work, but I'm also in school. So I have that competitive drive in school to get the best test score, or at least for myself, do the best that I can for myself in that. I go to yoga now and then when I have the energy to do so and be like, yeah, you know what? I can use the 5-pound weights instead of the 3-pound weights. Little things like that. I think that kind of goes back on the identity thing. Like for me, when I think of identity, it's not one thing. It's a whole bunch of things that I switch in between. Yeah. And finding that fluidity between all of those different panels of who I am is becoming more apparent as I step away from swimming. Because I think at the end of the day, swimming took like 5 hours of my life every single day.
Right. Wow.
I don't know how I did that because I go to yoga for an hour and I'm
done.
Blasted.
I'm over it.
No, I mean, that's so true. And I don't think we can be one thing. You can't just be the swimmer, Dennis. You can't be the soccer player. So it's like, I think fueling that in your next endeavors, like, I have no doubt that the lessons you learned in swimming, you know, those hard times, that it will, you know, help you in your professional career.
Yeah. I think that just like from a final takeaway standpoint, you've achieved so much. You're so young right now. If there's one thing that from a personal development standpoint outside of, you know, maybe it's that introspection of going to therapy, or it's, you know, seeking outside help, like what's one thing you think that somebody could take away from this conversation that is how they can get the best out of themselves every day and maybe come close to achieving something like being an Olympian?
You really saved the hardest question for last. God. I just think that's such a personal question. And my takeaway for myself is going to be completely different to someone like you or to you. Like, I don't think there's a one recipe fits all. And I think that would be my takeaway is knowing what makes you you. What is your mission statement? What are your values? What do you look for when, you know, you go about life, so to speak? What are the things, you know, we talked about what are the things you can do for yourself? What makes you happy? I think falling back on that is what's going to carry you throughout. Because there's never been something that, you know, I didn't like doing that I continued to do and like loved it. There's no shot. If you don't like it, like you're probably not going to like it. So might as well just go try something different.
Yeah.
And you just keep doing that until you hit something and you're happy. I don't know.
No, I love it. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, totally. Thank you so much for having me. It was awesome.
Of course.
For sure.
Well, I think that wraps another week of
What is Humans. Thanks guys.